Testing, testing, 1, 2. Testing, testing.
All right.
Just say mic 2, mic 3, mic 4.
Mic 2, mic 3, mic 4.
On mic 2.
Mic 3. Mic 4.
Mic 5. Oh, it's not even on.
Mic 5. Mic 6. Mic 7. Mic 8. Mic 9. Mic 10.
Everybody around you. Excellent. How long did you get that sentence down?
I think I'm all set. I started in 20, I think this is my next
I said I would maybe try to set up a play date with like a bunch of second graders. You know, like playground or something like that. It was like, all right. Is everybody here?
We can reconvene our meeting to open session. The board has been in executive session since 6 o'clock to discuss a confidential personnel matter, a student matter, and a contractual matter. If we could all please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We could have introductions.
Dave Hurst.
Meredith Moriarty.
Catherine Nadeau.
Jody Monroe. Holly Dellenbaugh.
Christine Beck.
Willow Bear.
Jonathan Fishbein.
And Judy Kehoe.
And Wendy Sampson, as indicated on the agenda, is joining us on the screen from Vermont.
Hi, everybody.
First up on the agenda is the approval of minutes. It is recommended by the superintendent that the Board of Education approve the minutes from the August 11th, 2021 regular board meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? That carries. Next up are our meeting reports, our superintendent's report.
Thank you. So I'd like to congratulate Tracy Farrell as part of our business department. The Business Teachers Association of New York State announced that the Business Education Department of the high school has been selected for the Department of the Year Award for 2020-21. And I'd like to compliment Tracy. She's done a tremendous amount of work to, I think you've all met her, to really get a lot of interest in the business program here at the high school. The department has demonstrated exemplary evidence in areas such as CTE, specialized courses, work-based learning, and college credit. So congratulations. And today was our first day of having all of our staff back. It's hard to believe it's September 1st. I'd really like to just take a moment to say I'm thrilled to start the new school year. I know that unfortunately there's more restrictions that are in place that we were hoping we would not have, but the staff have been tremendously supportive, the community has been tremendously supportive, and tonight one of the presentations is kind of sharing of our reopening plans, but looking forward to everyone being back. Tomorrow we have a conference day and we have a lot of professional development planned. We've done a lot of training in the last few days, and next Thursday we have all of our students returning in person. So there's been a lot of kids in the building. We had freshman orientation. It was nice to see, you know, last year when kids first came back, it was somewhat somber. They were very quiet. Now it's like, we're back. So it was great to have the kids back. So looking forward to the start of another school year. So thanks very much, and that's my report.
Anybody have any questions for Jody? Next up is our board report. I had the chance to attend the new teacher orientation lunch, and it was great to see all the new faces and all the new energy that's going to be coming into our buildings, which is great. So just an additional welcome to all the new faces. And I just also wanted to say a welcome back to all of our staff today, and next week to all of our students. I know I personally am very excited for the students to go back to school next week. Does anybody have anything else that they would like to share? I think Meredith, you had something you wanted to raise.
I just wanted to address the issue of last week there was a pedestrian who was hit in the head while she was walking on the sidewalks right in front of the middle school. because we all know that the road on Kenwood is very close to the sidewalks. There's really no room in between. And so I think we should address the safety concerns there, as we're going to have so many kids walking, especially to the middle school there. I'd like to see if we can ask the town and advocate for the town. I understand, this isn't something we can do in terms of the roadway, but if we can ask the town to immediately implement some short-term safety solutions, such as, for example, traffic delineations, which are like temporary, almost poles that act as cones that would provide, you can put them along the side of the sidewalk, which would provide a barrier, a temporary barrier, but still a barrier between the sidewalk and the road. So I think we should talk to the town about that. I don't think simply painting a line along the sidewalk, which is one of their suggestions, encouraging kids to only walk on one side of the sidewalk, is going to be effective at all, because we know we have large groups of kids walking together. They're not going to walk, one in front of the other. And additionally, I think the middle school needs to address the issue of pickup and drop off. Especially in the parking lot. We haven't heard anything just in general about pickup and drop off, how the parking lot is supposed to work. For new parents, new sixth grade parents, you have no idea what's happening, where you're supposed to go. So certainly middle school should be informing parents about the path within the parking lot. But also the Bethlehem Police Department just put out a statement talking about safety concerns in this area, and in that statement they advised that parents not drop off on any of the surrounding streets and only drop off in the parking lot. I don't think that's a workable solution. Anyone who's ever done pickup or drop off, or even driven in that area, in those hours, knows that it would not be workable for everyone to wait in line to enter the parking lot in the middle school. So I think we do need to provide parents with guidelines about how to do pickup and drop off in a safe manner. So I don't know if that's something we can ask Mr. Klugman to address within the next few days.
Well, I can certainly ask Mr. Klugman about the plans for parent information. I don't know if, I know they have plans for parent pickup and drop off, but I'm wondering if some of the work that's going on with the town construction is causing changes for that.
I'm sure it is.
Yeah. So
But
I can.
that's also, parents are going to be dropping off,
Right.
next week, and we need to know what to
Right.
do.
So I'll follow up with him, and I saw Mr. Nolte over there taking down notes to communicate that with the town as well, because he's been working on the sidewalk area that's being reconstructed in front of the middle school. So.
Right. But I really think it's an issue starting at Ellesmere Avenue and going all the way to Delmar Place. Well, I'm not sure how far it goes down that it's that close, but certainly all the way to the middle school from Ellesmere is really dangerous, especially when we get into leaf pickup and snow removal. But that's another topic. But if we're simply talking about the next few weeks, I think we should do something about that, because, someone got seriously hurt. And when we're talking about groups of kids walking together, we all know that they're not going to, stay to simply one side of the sidewalk.
Thank you. Anybody else have comments or anything?
No,
you'd like
just to thank Jody and the staff for doing the updates, the Q&A sessions with parents and staff. And I think you have one staff meeting left.
I just did it, the second one today.
This was the last one?
Yep.
Okay.
Anything else? Moving forward, next on our agenda are presentations this evening. We have two, and the first is on our reopening plans for the 2021-2022 school year.
Not that one. Okay, is this on? Okay. So I wanted to just kind of highlight some of our return to school protocols. I know I have shared this with parents and staff, and this is kind of ongoing as we move through day by day, and we'll provide updates as we get them. So we did work this summer with our reopening committees. Our goal, as we said, really since last spring, was to have all students return to in-person instruction. And we are really thrilled that we're able to do that to start the school year. This goal has been endorsed by the CDC, the American Academy of Pediatrics, and the New York State Education Department, with their primary goal to getting students back in school. And the start to the school year is a little different this year. The first day of school when students are back is September 9th. So again, a little different than a typical year. It actually worked out well. It gave us a little more time to kind of put our plans in place. But this is the opening first couple of weeks of school. So our goal, as it was last year, is to ensure a healthy learning environment. And as part of that plan, we are implementing the COVID mitigation plan as recommended by the CDC. Currently, Albany County is an area of high community transmission, and so some of the mitigations we have in place will be adjusted based on those protocols. So we have the high, substantial, moderate, and low. And the one thing I do think we'll see more this year than we did last year. We had our opening plan last year. It really didn't change a whole lot through the course of the year, unfortunately, until we got to the very end of the school year where we finally could loosen up. And I do think this year our plan will tend to be more fluid, and I'm hopeful that it will allow for more flexibility as we go through the year. This plan was developed by district and building leaders throughout the summer, as well as input from the reopening task force, including our school physician. And again, this is something that we'll be revisiting regularly as we move forward during the school year. So when I talk about layered mitigation, these are many of the things that are part of our plan. Obviously, one of the most important aspects of our plan is for people to self-screen and monitor any symptoms they might have and stay home if they are ill. Talking about hand hygiene and respiratory etiquette, we are requiring face masks in all of our buildings. Physical distancing, last year, if you recall, the distancing that was recommended was 6 feet in general. The CDC did reduce that to 3 feet in most instances. Improved airflow, we addressed last year and will continue to do that. Daily cleaning and sanitizing, looking at what our screening testing program will be, and then working with the Albany County Department of Health in regards to contact tracing, quarantine and isolation protocols. Again, I want to remind people that that is done by the health department. The school districts do not quarantine and isolate individuals. And of course, encouraging vaccines for those who are eligible. So there is an indoor universal mask mandate that just went into place for schools to begin the school year. So there's universal masking of teachers, staff, students, and visitors to all our schools, ages 2 and over, who are medically able to tolerate a face covering. We had already planned to do this as part of our reopening plan. So we began the mandate back in August 16th. So now it is a statewide requirement. So the mask rules in schools, indoors, as I just said, at all times. Outdoors is 3 feet when 3 feet distancing cannot be met. So one of the questions that has come up is, why do students have to wear a mask outside at recess? And this is really why. Last year, if you recall, our recess was very prescribed. Students couldn't mix cohorts. They were kind of in very set games. And we felt that students really missed that ability just to play and interact with each other. So in order to do that, and allow them to just be on the playground and play kickball. In order to do that, we can't guarantee that students would be maintaining 3 feet of distance, so we'll start the school year with masks at recess. The same would be true for physical education. If they're outside and they're 3 feet or more apart, they can take their mask off. But if they're doing an activity that requires them to be closer than 3 feet for a period of time, then they would be required to wear a mask. Again, this is as it stands today. The distancing rules in the classroom, as I mentioned, last year it was 6 feet. This year it is 3 feet recommended. However, many of our classrooms do allow for more than 3 feet of distance. So we will maximize our distancing when we're able to. On average, I would say most classrooms will allow students to be 4 to 5 feet apart. Distancing rules are different for adults than students. So for students, it's 3 feet between each other, regardless of vaccination. From adult to students, it's recommended 6 feet, again, as much as possible. Between 2 adults who are vaccinated, the recommended distance is 3 feet, and if one or both adults are unvaccinated, the recommended distance is 6 feet. So one of the questions that's come up is, why is there no virtual options for students this year? And I already mentioned that the priority of school, as supported by the CDC and the American Academy of Pediatrics, is to have all students in person. We do have an option for families who have a child who has medical complications or medically fragile, and this is offered through Capital Region BOCES. It is independent of the district, and it does require families, because it's independent of the district, to register those students for the full year. At this time, we've not had any, I don't believe we've had any request for this option. So what if parents decide not to send their student back to school? We really have not had a lot of parents concerned about this. The majority of parents are happy, I think, to have their students return, but we have the BOCES option as an option. Also, families can choose to homeschool. The homeschooling option does give families a little more flexibility, where some parents may want to start the year in a homeschool model. They can always have their children return to school when they're perhaps more comfortable. This is a program that's independent of the school district, and their students are primarily taught by their parents, or sometimes they will do an online program. So another question that's come up is about high school students, or secondary students, I should say, logging into class from home if they're quarantined or sick. So we are not offering the hybrid model this year. We do not think that is a good model for teaching and learning. It presents a lot of limitations for the teacher as to what they can do, because they have to always be in a virtual environment in order for a hybrid model to work. So it limits a lot of hands-on activities, a lot of lab activities. So in addition, part of our reason for changing this model is that, based on the CDC guidance and what we've seen so far from Albany County Department of Health, it seems that there will be very few students that will have to quarantine this year. Last year, I think everyone recalls, we had large numbers of students quarantined, and this model would not work. But we will be providing instruction through classroom teachers for students who are quarantined. And by doing this, students will get instruction for the majority of time from their classroom teachers to stay current when they are quarantined. And there is a contingency plan in place. However, we're hoping we don't have to use this. So we have had a remote option in the past, and if we have to go to remote, so for example, if we start to see large numbers of students who are getting quarantined or staff, then we have a plan in place to switch to a virtual environment if needed. We have students currently in grades 3 through 12 who have devices that they bring home. So if we had to go remote tomorrow, the majority of those students would have their devices at home and we'd be ready to go. We would have to work with the younger students and their families to get those devices home to them, but we have a plan in place should we need this. There have been questions, and there's quite a bit of information in the CDC guidance regarding testing. So there is, we will have a screening program to test asymptomatic individuals who are unvaccinated or who are not fully vaccinated. This is part of our mitigation plan. For students, we do still need parental consent for students to participate in a testing program. We are currently not planning to test students or staff who present with symptoms during the day. We would follow the same protocol we did last year in that we would contact the families, encourage them to contact their healthcare providers, and determine if they should be tested for COVID or not. There's not a COVID tracker this year. I know many people are very disappointed about that. We're asking families and staff to monitor their symptoms. If they're not feeling well, please contact your healthcare provider, and the healthcare provider will decide if, in fact, they should go for testing or not. Filtration and air quality, we did change last year. We have MERV 13 filters in place. We will continue with those. The fresh air dampers on our units do bring in fresh air 100%, so we're not recirculating air. Also, we do encourage everyone, when the weather permits, take students outside when it's possible or open windows and doors. The community transmission, as I mentioned, we are currently in the red area, the high transmission. So anyone, this is on our website, and you can go to that link and you can plug in the zip code in Albany County, and it will tell you each day where we are. One question that has come up about the reopening plan and these different transmission zones is how often will they change? They are on a rolling average, so they're not going to, one day it's not going to go from red to yellow. So we will start to see trends that go up or down and probably be able to foresee where the changes, or when the changes are going to happen. So this isn't something that's going to be daily changing. So our COVID mitigation plan, just to give you an example, this is all on our website, but when we look at the different transmission rates, one example is high-risk sports or high-risk activities. We are in the red zone, and that in the CDC document does indicate you should either cancel those activities that are considered high risk or ensure the individuals participating are vaccinated. So you can see that there are differences when you get to the different transmission areas. So I want to just let everyone know then the flow charts, we did share these out. These are on our website. They were provided to us on August 23rd. They are now in draft form, and we'll probably be getting updates on these quarantine protocols, but I don't expect them to look a whole lot different. Basically, what you'll see is flow charts that talk about when somebody would be quarantined. They indicate students in the lunchroom. There's a form I'll get to in the buses. So you can kind of go through this to determine if a student or if an adult will be quarantined. There's a few big factors as to whether or not an individual will be quarantined, is maintaining the distance it's recommended, making sure everyone is wearing proper face coverings where it's covering the nose and the mouth, and that vaccination status does play a big role in whether or not individuals get quarantined. So one of the things we have changed regarding our lunchrooms, particularly for our elementary and middle school, is we are going to try and maintain 6 feet distancing for lunches. So what that means is the middle school is actually adding another area for lunches we had hoped we could just use 2 spaces. the cafeteria and the library. Now we are going to use the upper gym for a lunch space in order to maintain 6-foot distancing, because we are concerned with students, if they're not 6 feet of distance and they're unmasked eating, that there will be larger numbers of quarantine, and we're really trying to prevent that so students are able to stay in school. In the elementary schools, students are going to begin by eating in their classrooms, and the classrooms are set up minimally 3 feet distance. But with elementary students, they're a little more flexible. They can move around the classroom, they can go on the rug and eat, they can go outside and eat. So we're going to work out plans with the teachers so that in elementary classrooms are eating 6 feet apart when they have masks off, and again, to avoid quarantining. This just shows the classroom, so you can see they differentiate between classroom settings, between students and adults, and who would potentially be quarantined or not. And the next one is transportation, which is somewhat of a problem in regards to quarantining because you can't maintain distance on school buses. So this was fairly helpful, and I think they're going to provide us with updated information on this. You can see that where there's a positive case, they give you an idea of who may or may not be quarantined. So we will be keeping track of seating charts on school buses for contact tracing purposes. So on to transportation. We do have a little bit of an issue with busing this year, and I think it's no surprise that there is a huge bus driver shortage across every school district in every state. So this really impacts the high school. So you can see the areas where we have some problems. So if we compare 2019 data to the requests we had this year, we asked parents to opt into transportation to get more accurate information. So you can see that these percentages are almost reversed, which presents a problem for our high school ridership and the routes that we have to plan for. So as I mentioned, we have a bus driver shortage like every district. We have an unusual increase in requests for transportation for our high school students. We're not sure that this will actually reflect actual ridership. We have 59 drivers, and a few years ago we had over 80. So 2 years ago, we began a 2-tier bus system, which allowed the high school to begin at 8 a.m. So in order to address the increased requests for buses at the high school and address the driver shortage, we will need to go, at least to start the year, to the old bell schedule or something very similar to that. And I think that's on the next slide. Yes. So this is not the exact schedule. This was a schedule from 2019-20. So it will look similar to this, although homeroom in period 1, I believe, will be adjusted slightly. So we will revert to this for a 10-week period, and we will hopefully get the actual ridership that we need for the high school and be able to make changes to our routing. If we're able to make changes sooner, our goal is to maintain that later start time. But I think, we need to look at what the ridership data will actually show. We also, I think, need to look at longer term, the bell time options for all the levels. Can we maintain the 2-tier system or not, or do we need to look at the 3-tier? And with the 3-tier, we would need to then look at start and end times for elementary, middle, and high school, and how that all works together. We also would probably want to look at what is the walking distance that we currently have, and is that something that we can maintain, or do we need to make adjustments on that? So for the beginning of the year, again, this is not the exact schedule. This is the one from 1920. but it will be similar to this, and this will allow transportation to make sure that we're getting all of our students K-12 picked up and dropped off in reasonable times. And the last thing I wanted to talk about with our reopening plan is vaccinations. So we currently have, as of today, that have been reported, 88% of our staff who are vaccinated, which is tremendous. We also have been tracking student vaccination data as well. And for our high school students, we are over 80% of our high school students who are fully vaccinated. So my recommendation for the board to consider is that all faculty and staff must be vaccinated as a condition of employment unless they have an approved exemption consistent with federal and state law. If the board approves this, then we would begin working with the bargaining units to determine testing requirements, work reassignments, or any other impacts. Is that it? Oh, sorry, I thought there was another slide. So that's it. That's a summary of the reopening plan with some shifts in transportation and a recommendation for mandatory staff vaccination. So I'll open it up
I know.
for any questions?
Yeah, I know. I had a couple questions. I'm sure others did as well. Could you just remind me, what is the current walking distance at each building level?
So for elementary, it's 2/10 of a mile, Judy?
All elementary students are
Right.
eligible for transportation. There is no minimum.
Oh, I thought, okay.
Yeah.
So,
You're thinking of it's 1/10 of a mile to their bus stop?
yes.
For eligibility for transportation.
Oh, right.
All.
Sorry, yeah, I was thinking
Okay.
of bus stop walking. Middle school is half a mile, and high school is a mile.
Okay. And with the homeschooling, I was wondering if we've had an increase in requests for homeschooling this year, or if it's about on par with what we normally see.
So the homeschooling requests, we had an uptick in homeschooling requests last year with COVID from the prior year. That number has not increased this year from last year. It's
Okay.
similar to what it was last year. I mean, there's still requests that are coming in, but we're not getting tons of additional requests right now.
I know I've had people reach out to me about the use of our facilities. What are we currently doing with respect to some of the outside community groups that in a normal year would use our school facilities for a variety of things, particularly athletics? Kind of where do we stand right now with that?
So in the red zone, which we're in currently, we're allowing outside use of the facilities, no indoor use of the facilities. In the orange, which is the substantial below red, we will be allowing it. In fact, we just updated our forms for indoor use, but only for Bethlehem students. So if they're currently attending our schools and they're in, for example, BBC or Dolphins or something, they would be able to come in and utilize our facilities with that group. And then in the yellow, hopefully we get there, then it would be generally open with COVID restrictions, and blue obviously would be pretty much use of our facilities. The only, I think, when we get into some of those lower transmission zones, some of the things might still be limited just because of the way we have to use some of the spaces. So if we have to continue to use the middle school gymnasium for lunches, that's an area that a lot of outside groups typically use, so that would be unavailable.
Okay. And then the last question I had, I'm conscious of the mental health impacts in particular that the last year plus has had on our students, and I'm just wondering if you can speak to, are we doing any professional development for our staff in terms of looking at that and how to address that with the students when they come back next week?
So tomorrow, we actually have a conference day. There's a lot of sessions on mental health for our staff. We've done a lot of training in mental health. I think the one thing that we were very fortunate in is we had added a lot of counseling positions prior to COVID. And many schools did not have all those resources. So we were able to provide a lot of support for students and families. Right before COVID, we added Saratoga Center for the Family, which is a resource for families and students as well. So we have been doing training, not just for our counseling staff, but for our general faculty and staff into things to kind of look for, who they can refer students and families to. But I do think that our counselors, and as part of our reopening plan, looking at all of the things we need to do to help transition students, particularly students who this will be their first time back in our buildings in a year and a half, will need some support in getting kind of back into those routines. So I think that we're well prepared to offer those supports. I think one of the hardships for many families is they're finding it very difficult to get support in the general community. If they're trying to reach out for a counselor somewhere, it's very difficult for them to be able to get an appointment because they've been so restricted. So I do think that much of that support will be on the school district to help with that. So,
Thanks. Other questions?
Okay, I had a couple. We talked about lunch and recess, but I was not clear whether we were combining cohorts at all for lunch recess or for mainstreaming of skills students.
So for lunches, kids will eat in their classroom, so they'll be with their students, the classmates they're with in elementary. Recess, they can, depending on who they're out with, they can play with different cohorts. That's why we are doing the 3 feet with masks during that time. And in regards to the cohorting of skills students or ENL students or anything, we are allowing cohorting. We're not restricting that.
Mixed cohorting.
Yes, we're having kids go into different cohorts. We are doing some limiting of that for the first few weeks of schools when we can avoid it. There's some situations where we can't because that's really part of their schedule. But when we're able to, for example, a speech group, if we're able to only have 2 students together from the same class for the first few weeks of the school year, rather than bringing them from 4 different classes, we're going to do that just to get underway. Or staff can take them outside because we hopefully will have good weather for at least the first month of school. But yes, we're going to mix cohorts.
And then I assume we'll be open to the option of allowing K-5 students to mix for lunch at some point as well. I think that's a really significant piece of their day to a student who has been in the same class with the same kids all day, all year.
Yeah. We talked initially when we were planning this, we actually thought that what we could start with was perhaps having a couple classes in the cafeteria at a time, and then a couple classes still in the classrooms. It doesn't really work from a space and logistics, but when we can allow that, we will. Yeah.
The transmission zones, are we calculating those by county numbers or by state numbers or by the CDC website?
By the CDC transmission, so you can, they refer to it generally by county because we're all Albany County. But if you put in the zip code, obviously you can see some variations within that.
Yeah, no, I just asked because the state reports, the county reports, the CDC reports, and they report differently and on different timeframes. So it's by the CDC, you're saying. For the hybrid not being ideal, I think absolutely. But I know that you said that we've expected very few students to be quarantined, and I think that's probably true from a classroom contact perspective, but we still have school buses, lunchrooms, whatever kids are doing on their own time outside of school. And we've already seen that the Delta variant is incredibly contagious, particularly with children, and that schools that have already started in the South have tons of kids out on quarantine. So I know I'm a little bit of a broken record on it, but I just urge us to be prepared to be a little more nimble in terms of kids having repeated quarantines. Maybe the whole class isn't quarantined, but particular students are out more than once throughout the school year and missing weeks of education at a time. Not that they're not getting some education at home, but I just think we need to try to be a little bit more flexible about how we can accommodate what might be a lot of time spent outside of school.
Sure, and I think you're probably talking more about younger students who aren't vaccinated, because most of the flow charts regarding quarantine is if you're vaccinated and you're not symptomatic, you're not going to be quarantined. And we did see that in the spring, where we had very few secondary students, and that wasn't even just with vaccination, just they were adhering to the distancing. We had very few secondary students who were quarantined. And the one benefit, I think, in regards to right now in the protocols is if we are masked, if we're distanced, they shouldn't even be quarantining elementary students, with the exception of the bus. And that was why when we saw the lunch protocols, we said, we need to rethink this and try and get 6 feet distancing, because we knew that was going to be problematic for quarantining. So I'm hoping that 6 feet distancing for lunches will help in those numbers.
Yeah.
But absolutely, best laid plans, I think we saw last year, did not really come to fruition many times, so.
Okay, and then my last thing was on the vaccinations for staff. I just want to clarify, we're talking about staff, whether you're a principal or a teacher or a bus driver or you work in the cafeteria, right? All staff. Across the board.
Yep.
I think that makes a ton of really good public health sense, and we've seen schools that are already in session in other states having massive quarantine issues with unvaccinated staff. I wondered about the date by which you're proposing we impose that. I saw in the resolution the 9th listed. Right, so getting someone who's not vaccinated, it takes at least 6 weeks to complete a vaccination. So I wondered what date we were targeting.
So September 9th would be for them to get their first dose, and then they would obviously have to maintain the distancing and, mask wearing and potentially testing during the time before they're not fully vaccinated. So the 9th is to get either your first dose or potentially put in for an exemption if someone qualifies. And then obviously we would need to negotiate some of those other pieces.
Okay,
Yep.
thank you.
So go ahead. That's the agreed upon date?
That's what's in the resolution.
Okay.
So that's
that
when
could
the start of
change
school.
Possibly, if that date wasn't agreed upon.
If you wanted to change it, my recommendation is the 9th, because that's the first day kids are here.
Okay.
I don't think we're negotiating the start date, if that's what you mean.
Okay.
I mean,
Yeah.
we can.
I didn't know if that was something you needed to get an
So
agreement
the
on.
9th is on there because that's the start of school.
Okay.
Yeah.
The other question I had for middle schoolers, how are you, now that you're going to have 3 areas for middle schoolers, the upper gym, the cafeteria, the library, how would it be determined where the students with their cohorts will have lunch? So is it their period class before lunch, they would go with them to?
That would be more of a Mike middle school question. I think they do it with their team
I
in
think
those
right-
areas.
My understanding is right now it's set up based on their team.
Right.
And their homeroom.
Yes.
So they're, they're kind of are traveling them together that
Right.
way.
But I know one of the concerns last year was that they didn't have a lot of choice in who they sat next to, and that has been addressed because they have a scanning system now, so it's easier to track, so students will have more flexibility in who they're able to sit with. I mean, granted, in 3 locations, it still is, more restricted than it would be if they were all in the cafeteria, but that will hopefully help, and they are able to go outside, of course, when it's nice weather, after they finish eating still, so that will be another time for them to socialize.
Yeah, and I think the thought process for doing it by team was that way ideally, there's be at least, one person on their
At
team
least
that they
one
would want to
person.
have lunch with.
It's all about lunch. So the last question I have is there a trigger, this is more of a Dave probably question, to go to a hybrid model, since we're going to be fluid, if we need it, whether it's at the elementary, high school, or middle school level, is there a number of students that would trigger that model? And if not, why not?
I mean, it's hard to know a set number ahead of time. I think it really comes down to when it becomes unmanageable and when it becomes no longer a viable resource for students. That number could be 5 students, it could be 10. Until we kind of go through the process of dealing with small numbers, it's hard to say when does that number become unmanageable.
And I think last year, if you recall, a lot of times when we had to go virtual, it was more due to staff shortages and staff having to quarantine than it was, I mean, there were certain times we had so many kids quarantined, we had no other option, but many times when we did have to go to a fully virtual model, it was because we didn't have enough staff.
The reason I asked is just, that, I have no problem saying, so I'm a vaccinated individual who ended up getting breakthrough COVID, and so my concern is now we have vaccinated high schoolers who may be outside of school associating with somebody who,
Sure.
may be unvaccinated, and the variant is obviously very contagious. So we might see a flip in how it happened last year, and just,
Right.
that's why I was curious as to if we had a number that would trigger a hybrid model or not, just for the benefit of the students, obviously.
Right.
Especially
Right.
as everyone's boosters come due, which was another thing I forgot to ask about, but I didn't see anything about mandating boosters or tracking that.
Yeah, I'm not sure where that's going to, I have been in touch with the pharmacist who provided us with the vaccine clinics for students last spring, and he is offered to provide a vaccine clinic or two here for us if there's interest and there's, people are challenged with getting vaccines, so that's an option that we can offer to provide boosters or for first vaccines for when students become eligible as well. So we'll look to do that.
Catherine?
First of all, thank you so much to you and the entire team for putting together these plans. It's no small feat of logistics and creativity, and so thank you. One of the things that you were talking about was having to shift the start time at the high school back to earlier, and one of the things that I was kind of picking up from the presentation, but I wanted to ask you explicitly, is it the goal of the administration and of the high school to get back to the later start time as soon as possible, or do you foresee us being stuck with the early start time for the remainder of the year?
So our goal would be to get back to that later start time. That was something that we worked hard. We had a committee that worked hard on that to try and get to that 8 o'clock start time, so that would be our goal. Some of that will be dependent upon the actual ridership we see during the first several weeks for the high school, and can we make changes in our routing structure, and the driver making sure that we can get all of our elementary and middle school kids transported within the time frame as well. So I can't guarantee we're going to go back to that time, but that is certainly the goal of the district. That was something that we really felt was a good change for our students, given some of the data to support that. And again, I think if we see that that's not possible with the structure we have in place, we need to potentially look at bell times in general, elementary, middle school, high school, and our bus either walking distance or the tiered system is a longer-term way to get back to that.
Thank you. And then just one follow-on there. Is there anything that families or the community that share that goal of getting back to the later start time as soon as we can, is there anything that folks can do to contribute to getting us there?
Well, if people haven't checked their Aspen for if your child is going to be taking a bus or not, please do that. That would be very helpful. And if you know someone that would be a good candidate to be a bus driver, please refer them our way.
And carpool.
What's that?
Carpool.
Yeah, carpool, great. Bike, walk, run, skateboard, whatever.
Just, and while we're on the topic of the buses and the walking distance, we can't just change the walking distance tomorrow. My
Well-
understanding is that it would have to go out for a vote to the community. Is that correct?
Somewhat, yes. So you
Okay.
could change the walking distance tomorrow if you went to the maximum allowable walking distance that state education allows, which is 2 miles for K through 8 students and 3 miles for high school students. So meaning those students would only be eligible for transportation if they're outside of the 2-mile distance or outside of the 3-mile distance for high school. So that you can do without a community vote. When you change it to a lesser amount than that, so if we went, for example, with a high school from 1 mile to 1.5, or 1.5 to 2 miles, that requires a vote by the community.
I would request that we at least start doing
Some data on
research
that?
on that and getting some data about what it looks like if we expand it to 1.5 or 2 miles, particularly at the high school.
Sure, we can look at that. Meredith, did you have any questions?
Yeah, just a couple. You were talking about maximizing space in the classrooms in order to give students 4 or 5 feet in between students. But I remember last year, when we were in the point where we had to do 6 feet, I know, some teachers didn't even have room for desks, or we certainly didn't have room for anything else in the classroom besides desks. Do the classrooms look different this year? Are all of our teachers, do they have a desk? Do they have what they need?
Some teachers did want their desk back, some decided they didn't. Some don't have space still for a big desk, so they might have something more portable. Some teachers really wanted their rugs back because that was a big piece, so they may have gotten their rugs back, and the trade-off was they couldn't have some of their tables. So there's definitely some limitations as to what would fit in classrooms, but I think you'll see, when you're able to go in, classrooms that look more similar to what they did prior to COVID. We are starting out with desks facing the same direction, because that has been recommended as best practice through Albany County. Hopefully, as things improve, we would be able to do some maybe U's or smaller groups, but I think many of the teachers wanted to have their rugs back because you can distance kids fairly well. It's also a decent space for kids to spread out and, have lunch and stay 6 feet apart. And then some did opt for some of their tables back where they could pull a few kids in for 10 minutes of reading or instruction or do their group work.
Okay.
And what the teachers felt would work best for their levels.
Along those lines, are we allowing shared manipulatives at the elementary school level, or are we doing the same thing as we did last year where everyone had their own little?
Yep. So for some things, they'll still be independent, and some of that, I think, is teachers found that worked really well, but we will be sharing materials at all levels. It doesn't require the disinfecting and cleaning that was required last year, so there will be more sharing of materials. We'll be cleaning things on a more daily basis. For example, last year, teachers at the secondary level were disinfecting desks between all their classes. Now the recommendation is just to do that daily. Some teachers may decide they want to do it more, but the cleaning protocols definitely have been reduced.
Okay, great. And then regarding the quarantines, are families going to be informed regarding positive cases in the classroom, even if they are not quarantined?
Yes, so that was definitely one of the recommendations that is part of the CDC in regards to if there's a positive case, but you are not a direct contact in quarantine, to still alert people that there was a potential exposure in a classroom or elsewhere, that they should be mindful of symptoms if they get them, and just be aware to kind of monitor themselves.
Great.
Yep.
And then, in talking about the fact that there will be hopefully fewer quarantines this year, you noted that if kids are sidelined by COVID-like symptoms, they will get instruction from teachers. Does that mean if kids are home with a cold but not COVID, are they going to have access to instruction, or is this just for official quarantines?
This is really for kids who are quarantined or have COVID, where they will be out for a period of time. If a student is just out with a cold or another illness that they would have had in the past, that certainly if the teacher is doing something and the child is well enough to participate, we could consider that, but in general, students would be just following the same protocols they did in the past, where the teacher would provide some work and they would get caught up when they return to school.
So I'm just trying to envision what this looks like. So I'm assuming you're talking about like they're going to get a packet or reading materials or something like that?
Sure.
Okay.
Yep.
And then just a quick question regarding lunch at the middle school. Like you said last year, I think one of the big complaints was regarding the assigned seating. So you indicated there'd be more flexibility this year. What exactly does that mean? Like, are kids going to be able to just sit down wherever they want and we just keep a seating chart? Or can they move? Or is it just, this is your seat?
For lunches?
For lunches at the middle school, yeah.
So I think they can select where they're going to sit.
Okay.
I don't know if they can change that daily, or they're going to pick a seat and who you want to sit next to for a period of time. That I'm not 100% certain of. I know they have built-in scanning codes. I don't know, Dave, do you know that? I don't know that either. Yeah.
Well, they just added the gymnasium to the plan.
Right.
Yesterday or the day before, so.
Right. So I'm not, but I know they will have flexibility to pick who they sit near, if they're in the gym or the cafeteria, the library, but I'm not sure of how long that would be a middle school question specifically.
Okay. And then I'm just assuming that also means that we're going to do the same thing with like the lunches being brought to the different locations as opposed to kids going through a lunch line.
Yes.
Okay.
So the one thing, Elisa Iser, she must have had some foresight. And she was having trouble getting food trays. Mm-hmm. So she has these see-through, almost like a lunch bag that will be easy for students, particularly the elementary who are in the classrooms, to move around the classroom and go over here to say 6 feet or take them outside. So it's actually much easier for them to carry than a tray would be.
Okay.
So she was able to get those, and that's what we'll be using for lunches. It's a see-through bag that she wasn't intending to get, but I think the fact she couldn't get the trays, she didn't have a lot of options.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Jonathan, do you have any questions? Wendy, did you have any questions?
Not at this time. I don't. No, thanks.
Okay. Thank you. Go ahead. Sure.
Sorry, just because you just brought this up, so is everything in the lunchroom required to be disposable again this year?
I think they're going to do some recycling. I don't know about the elementary. I know that the middle school, I think Mark Warford said that they are going to be doing some recycling though this year. I think it'll be limited, not like it was prior to COVID, but I think there are plans for that.
But it's not reusables? Like such as metal and things that were
No.
running through a dishwasher?
Right.
And is that DOH or is that the district that's making that decision?
It's not DOH, but I don't think we have the capability to do that right now with the way we're having to handle lunches.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Jody, I did talk with Mark about the garden, and he happened to mention, because I asked him what kind of recycling would he be able to do this year. He said, to the extent possible,
Yep.
they're going to ramp up that program and the composting. He wasn't sure how that would work yet,
Yep.
but he said the intention was to get that going again as best as they could.
Yeah, yep, I know that's a goal of the green team.
Anybody else? Thank you very much.
Yep, thanks.
Moving on to our second presentation this evening, we have a presentation on the potential facilities improvement project. And I'll move my chair again.
Good evening. I'll be as brief as possible, since this is my eighth presentation on the bond project, and you're probably sick of hearing from me. Tonight, we're going to recap where we are in the process and some of the actions that the board needs to take tonight to have our bond vote. So just recapping from the 5-year facilities plan, we've pared down the project to $40.7 million worth of projects. We've had 7 previous presentation. We've familiarized the board and the community with the largest elements of the project. At the August 11th board meeting, the board finalized the scope. We have 184 separate elements all together. Tonight, I'm going to summarize the project and the actions needed by the board. As always, we have Drew Jones online with us for questions. So there's a lot of information out there for a current list of the project elements and the 5-year plan. Please visit the district website. There's also videos of the previous board meetings where we've talked about a number of items. So of course, I love pie charts, and the first one I kind of broke down the large project by scope, okay? And scope being site, building renovation, MEP, which stands for mechanical, electrical, and plumbing, building envelope, health and safety items, and asbestos abatement. As expected, site is the largest component of the bond project, representing about 30% of it, and that includes the synthetic turf, paving, repaving around a lot of the district, drainage improvements, and pavilions that we've talked about at each building. The second largest portion is building renovation and educational improvements. This is I'll call it the exciting part of the bond project. We're going to be improving and renovating the middle school auditorium, the LMC, the fax rooms. We're doing classroom improvements at Glenmont and Slingerlands, and transportation. We'll be getting new offices in the front there. I'm not going to review the other components other than to mention that the electrical bus infrastructure number is included in the MEP work. This chart represents the whole project by building. Please note that the development of the overall project was based upon condition and needs identified at each building. The pie chart gives an indication of the distribution of the project by building. As you would expect, the larger, more sizable buildings have the larger share of the pie. This is Judy's favorite slide. We previously indicated that the project would be budget neutral, and thanks to the SR funds and the capital reserves, we can attain this budget neutral position. And we're still going to retain about 1.7 in capital reserves. Okay, so right now we have 15.1 million in reserve, so if you less the 5.1 of the 2015 reserve and the 8.3, that leaves us about 1.7 in reserve. So the district's building ratio is 70%, and of course the project will be bonded over 15 years to align with the flow of building aid. So this is no added impact to the community, so this is a great position for the district. Okay, so there are a number of resolutions that the board needs to adopt tonight. The first being the seeker negative declaration resolution and declaration declaring the district as lead agency. You'll also have to adopt the bond resolution and then authorizations for the capital reserve. So I'm going to turn it over to Drew Jones now to review the various aspects of the seeker resolution. Drew? Drew, you there? You're muted.
You all were muted there for quite a second there, my apologies. So I'm going to talk a little bit today about the packet of information that the board received that is going to constitute the negative declaration resolution. The first 2 pages of that are part 2 and part 3 of the short environmental assessment form. And this is the district essentially acting as lead agency, affirming the information that they've already stated in part 1 of the short form EAF. The second page of that is where we say how we determine the significance of each of these items. And that's going to be in a future part where we fill out a full part 3 to the environmental assessment form to really give all the explanation that we need for why these items don't pose any adverse effects to the environment. Page 2 and 3 are the page 3 and 4 are the actual negative declaration that the board is making with a conditional negative no. And for the project, pages 5 through 10 are the reasons supporting the negative declaration. And thank you for showing the screen there. And what this does is it just goes through each of the points that on the short form part 2, where we check the box, and I say we in the broadest sense. This is stating why we see those check boxes as valid, saying that there is no or very limited impact. It goes through it point by point. I'm not going to go through it point by point today because, as I mentioned, this is the district speaking as lead agency. And really this is reaffirming everything that we've already stated about the project in the short form part 1s and part 2s. The last 2 pages of the document are the actual negative declaration the negative declaration and the declaring of lead agency by the Board of Education. I'm willing to take any questions here if we want to get any more fine-grained than this, but these are the 2 things that need to be part of the negative declaration and part of the actions of the board.
So do we want to talk about any questions regarding the resolutions at this point or finish the presentation?
I'm trying to think of what's easiest. Does anybody have any questions about the negative declaration?
Well, I think I need to hear from Drew just a little more explanation of how the seeker process works, and I understand we have to approve this, but could you just explain to me the steps, what happens after we approve this? I guess I'm just not real clear on the whole seeker process.
I'm sorry, I did not hear all of that. Could someone restate?
Do you want me to try to restate that? Drew, can you hear me?
I can barely hear you, yes.
Meredith was just looking for some elaboration on the seeker process, I think generally.
Yeah.
And just sort of how it works.
Sure, not a problem. Okay, so let me flip back to the action that we took on August 11th. That was the first step in the process, and what the district did was they declared their intent to be called the lead agency for the project. And that's needed to actually send a packet of information, including short form environmental assessment forms, part 1, along with our scope list, maps, and other information to other state agencies, in our case, the New York State Department of Education and the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation, who in theory could claim lead agency, okay? And what we ask them to do in reviewing that information is to give their own negative declaration on being lead agent and to allow the district to be the lead agent. So on the 11th, the district made a determination that they wanted to intend to be the lead agent. On August 12th, we sent out packets of information to SED and DEC. On August 24th, we received SED's consent to the district being the lead agent for the process. And on the 31st, DEC gave their consent for the district to be the lead agent. And the lead agent in this case is making sure that they're following all the processes of SECRA and making sure that what is being stated on these forms is held to. So that there are no negative environmental impacts and there are no adverse impacts from the work that we're doing outside of what we know and are being mitigated by the processes set forward in the SECRA. So that's kind of where we are. So at this point, the board would be claiming lead agency. The documents that we have in front of you today are you as a lead agency talking to the future, essentially, saying, we reviewed this as lead agent, we say these things about it, we found no issue with the project on a number of issues in relation to the environment, and that where we do see issues, they will be mitigated by processes laid out by the DEC and the CFOO process. So that's a quick encapsulation. Is there anything else we'd like to talk about?
No. Does anybody else have questions for Drew on this issue?
Okay, so the other thing that the board will have to decide is the actual vote date. We're suggesting October 19th. Okay, next slide. So you've seen this tentative project timeline. One thing that has changed is that we did move the community forum to September 27th. Basically, the goal would be to have the project designed, approved by SED, so we could bid in early February 2023, and basically have all construction done by December of 2024. Communications. As mentioned earlier, the website is a great place for a lot of information. The district also plans on mailing out the postcards and the newsletter. We'll be continuously updating the website, social media, traditional media, and all that other good stuff. And that is it.
Anybody have any questions? Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Next up on the agenda is our recognition of public comment on an agenda item. If we have anybody with us this evening who would like to speak on an agenda item, now would be the time to come up to the microphone.
Does that mean include the, something we discussed as an agenda item?
Yes, if you have a comment on an agenda item, now would be a time to come up to the microphone. If you could please state your name.
I'll try to be brief. I actually spoke a couple of weeks ago, but I thank you for letting me speak. My name is Harold Adler. I live in Del Mar with my wife and with two of our grandkids and our daughter and our husband. Our daughter is a physician at Albany Medical Center, a professor there, surgery, OBGYN. Her son-in-law is a research scientist, but he's staying home with the kids being so little. One is 6 and one is 4. I do apologize. I know the press is here. I was going to mention names and everything, but I'm not going to do that because I don't think it's appropriate. I do have an email I'll send out. I did send one out before. The issue, of course, is with our 6-year-old granddaughter. I know there's no remote learning. We were hoping there would be, because between my daughter, who's a physician, between my son-in-law, who's a research scientist, and between my wife, who's an advanced practice nurse and certified nurse midwife, they're scared to death, of course, as I am, about COVID, the variants. There's now a new variant. And of course, as much as we love the government and the CDC, who change their mind all the time, it's scary. For the first 17 years, I was an attorney, represented the homeless, but I also brought the class action on behalf of handicapped kids, as we referred to them then, because hundreds of thousands were in inappropriate settings, being left back year after year. Hundreds of thousands were staying home. It was Jose P. versus Ambach. Every special ed teacher probably is familiar with that. This was in 1979 when I first became an attorney. And then 15 years later, as now, I became a Supreme Court judge in New York State. So I have a little knowledge of education and nothing about the medicine. We were hoping at least until elementary school kids could be vaccinated, that remote learning might be a possibility. The stuff my daughter sees in school, at the hospital, is horrifying. And of course, as we know now, little children are being admitted to hospitals, some of them on respirators, and we've lost these young souls' lives. But I know that we want to have everyone go back to school. We would love it. My wife for 45 years is African American, therefore the kids are, and we love the diversity and like adding to it, so to speak, in Bethlehem. But we've decided, it appears, at least for now, to have our 6-year-old homeschooled. She spent 2 years at Circle for Friends. She spent kindergarten, of course, here, and then, of course, first grade was a complete wipeout, Actually, Circle of Friends once asked if our grandson could go there. He's 4. But we said no because he can't be vaccinated. It was heartbreaking to say no. We loved the place. And our granddaughter has some special needs. She's flourishing. She did last year with Mrs. Sarnacki, who is her main teacher, virtually. So who knows how long she'll need that. Our problem, of course, at this point is she's healthy, thank God. My wife is undergoing chemotherapy for lymphoma, but she appears to be doing well, but she's still doing chemo. I understand, and I know that we got an opinion already from the gentleman here, that the kid has to be ill in order to get BOCES to provide services. From what we understand, the CDC's recommendations is if the child has a condition that's compromising their health, or any family member who lives in the home, like my wife, the child is eligible and should have that distant learning supplied by whomever, including BOCES. And BOCES is doing it in other jurisdictions. If a child or someone who lives in the home has a compromising condition, I understand in Albany they may not be doing it. I've reached out to a lot of my friends, obviously some of whom I've worked with for many years on the Jose P. case, the education case, and we don't know where we're going to go with that, but I can't, and I won't mention names at this point in terms of identifying our family, because the press is here, and the one thing I learned about as a judge for 27 years is you don't talk to the press, it never comes out good. But you'll all be getting an email from us. I know the superintendent, Mr. Hurst, has already a copy of former ones. I want to thank you for letting me speak. We are dying to let our granddaughter and eventually next year, us grandson, to come to school. That's why we moved to Del Mar when our daughter decided to take, the professorship at Albany Medical Center. But we just are not comfortable doing it yet. And God willing, it won't get worse, but we have our fears as to where we're headed. But we're going to reach out to BOCES. We're going to reach out to all of you, again, in a letter, an email, seeing if there's some way we could resolve it. We're ready for homeschooling between my wife, me, certainly our son-in-law, and we can easily do it at this point until, and hopefully it'll be just months, until they can be vaccinated. But I thank you for listening to me, and take good care. And if you have any questions, I'll certainly, but I don't think.
Thank you for your comments.
Okay, and thank you for getting back to me.
Do we have anybody else who would like to speak on an agenda item this evening? Next on the agenda, item 6, action items. A, finance action items. It is recommended that by the superintendent that the Board of Education approve the following finance action items 1 through 6.
Point of order.
Yes.
I'd like to isolate item number 6 for a separate vote.
Okay. Let me restate the recommended action then. It is recommended by the superintendent that the Board of Education approve the following finance action items 1 through 5.
So moved.
Second?
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Those items pass. With respect to the remaining item, it is recommended by the superintendent that the Board of Education approve the finance action item number 6.
Point of order. I move that we bifurcate the vote so that the proposition for the plastic grass be separated and have a separate public vote on that item.
So just so that I understand, are you moving to amend the resolution that's attached to item number 6?
Yes.
I don't agree with,
Well, first, we need a second for the motion, and then we can have discussion.
Second.
Okay. If we can have some discussion on the motion to amend the resolution to separate out the artificial turf field portion of the bond resolution. Christine, did you have a comment?
yeah, I disagree with splitting out the bond. I think as a school board, we have to show support for all of our programs. I think that we had a majority vote with keeping the artificial turf in the bond, and that separating it out, the community has the opportunity to come out and vote as a bond together, and if it does not get supported at that time, it can go up for a revote. But I think at this point in time that we had the majority again for the artificial turf, and that it would be a disservice to the sports to show that as a board, we're not supporting them as an entity as inclusive in our school like we would any other program.
I think there's a difference between the board showing its support for our programs and a vote on putting a polluting substance into the ground and adding to the pollution of plastic into our environment, along with the materials that are contained in the crumb rubber, such as lead and other toxic chemicals. Our school, this district, has won awards for its sustainability programs. The middle school sustainability programs earned the United States Education Department's Green Ribbon Award the first year it was established in 2012, and the Governor's Award for Environmental Excellence in 2017. The district went online with solar power in 2019, and this year the district is beginning the transition to electric buses. After taking all of these great steps to a more sustainable future for our children, the inclusion of a turf field, basically plastic grass, in a bond takes us 20 steps backwards. And it sends a mixed message to our students. We teach them that sustainability is a necessary step toward reducing carbon emissions, reducing the release of toxins in our water and atmosphere, and in short, to help heal the earth. We've been, in many ways, poisoning plants and inhabitants for years. All CEOs of the big tobacco companies at one point stood up in front of Congress and swore that no proof existed that smoking tobacco was harmful. Similarly, we now have the purveyors of this plastic grass who have stated that no proof exists that plastic grass is harmful to the environment. We know tobacco kills and costs millions in health care. How long before we acknowledge the harmful effects and how much damage plastic grass does, or plastics, microplastics, do in our water and in the food chain? Currently, coral would rather eat microplastics than real food, and it's one of the causes for coral dying. Coral die, the fish around the coral die, and the whole food chain eventually could fall apart. I don't think that'll happen in my lifetime, but I do think that it's possible if we don't take steps. The fact that, as one letter writer pointed out to the board, we run tires and that leaves rubber on the road, and it contributes to pollution is absolutely true. But we don't have to add to it. I think we send a mixed message to our students when we're adding to pollution. On the one hand, we're doing all these wonderful sustainable things, but on the other hand, we are putting toxics into the ground and asking our kids to play on them. There was a study by the Connecticut Department of Environmental Protection that identified concerns related to the number of chemicals in stormwater runoff from artificial turf fields, including leaching of high levels of numerous chemicals that cause particular concern for aquatic organisms. Now, that may not be humans, but eventually it is humans. Eventually it gets to us. Why is it that the recommendation is now that you don't eat tuna more than once a week, and that pregnant women don't eat tuna at all? It's because there's mercury in it. Why is there mercury? Because of all the dumping that we did. At this point, in good conscience, I think the only thing we can do is separate it out. We have a split board. It's not, most of the decisions this board makes are unanimous. Most of us will come and we will end up agreeing one way or another, but we end up agreeing. But this is a rather controversial issue, and we have a split board on this issue. And as a result, and from what I'm hearing from the public, and this past weekend I was at the Saturday Farmers Market, and I have never had 20-plus people come up to me and talk to me about, and thanking me for my vote at the last board meeting, and talk to me about what their concerns were. Now, I stopped counting at 20, and I don't remember how many more there were, but the bottom line is this is, because it's so controversial, because we did bifurcate it out the last time this bond was in front of this issue was in front of the public, I think we should give them a chance to vote on it by itself. If we do keep it together, I think we'll be back here voting again. Because if the bond goes down, I think you're going to have to figure out why did it go down, and then likely separate out the turf. I support these programs, the sports programs, but I don't support the kind of pollution that plastic grass is going to bring to us. And one final thing. We were told that this can be recycled, but I have yet to been able to find a single recycling place that will take plastic grass. What I have found is reports of plastic grass being illegally dumped. And that's something I'm sure we don't want to get into as far as illegal dumping, but at some point we're going to have to replace this. And we're going to have to pay to have the plastic grass either recycled or dumped somewhere, and we'll have to pay for a new field of this stuff to be put back in. So I have grave concerns, and I think the best thing we can do is give the public the opportunity to have a separate vote on this issue.
Does anyone else have comments on the issue?
Yeah, I couldn't agree with Mr. Fishbein more. I mean, we not only have a split board, but we have a split community. We've heard from many, many community members on the turf issue, and on virtually no other issue. I mean, in my short time on the board, I've seen no other correspondence on any other issue within the facilities plan. So this is the one thing. And again, also the one thing that I've had community members say that they specifically want the opportunity to vote on. Because, and I haven't heard anybody come out against the athletics department. I support the athletics department. But I also can't see laying down this much plastic and trying to say that that's okay. Because this stuff never goes away. It never goes away. It gets smaller, it gets relocated, it never goes away. And so whether we ourselves are going to be dealing with this problem, or it's going to be my kids or their kids, it never goes away. And standing up and saying, okay, this is my opinion, but of all the people that I've talked to, not one of them has come up to me and said, you know what, when I voted for you, it was because of your expertise on turf. They want the opportunity to vote on this themselves. So let's put it out there, and let's not risk the other parts of the facility plan that have agreement.
Meredith?
Can I add to it? I just wanted to mention, when we first started talking about, we were talking about environmental concerns and toxins, and now it's kind of changed, and the direction's now waste. But if we look around the cafeteria, we have plastic chairs, plastic tables. We could go in every room in the district and find plastic that would probably have the same issue that we're talking about with recycling in regards to the turf field. There are no viable statistics on the issues with the turf field as of today's date, and we did have a majority vote on putting it on the bond. And everybody is indicating that the community wants the opportunity to vote. The community does have the opportunity to vote on it as a one vote, as this is what we're putting out as a board. The majority of the board did support it last week. It's not a split board. There was enough to pass it. So now we're talking about whether or not we're going to put it out and support it as we did last week. And if it goes down, then we split it out. But I think just as many community members that walked up to Jonathan, I think we can all say that there's many that say they want a turf field, students, parents. And I think we made a mistake the last time splitting it out. And again, everybody's vote counts, so we will know either way if it's separated or not.
I'll just say that I also disagree with bifurcating the resolution. I think it is very important that the community votes on it, but I think the bond should go to the community as a whole for an up or down vote, all the projects together. And I don't see a benefit to splitting it apart. Otherwise, there could be an argument for splitting every single piece of it out. Maybe there are people that don't want the middle school auditorium updated or don't want new pavilions at the elementary schools. I think you have to keep it all together, put it out there for everybody, and if it's voted down, then we cross that bridge at that point. But that's where I stand on it. I don't know if Willow or Meredith or Wendy, I don't know if you have any comments, or if not, we can vote on the motion to amend the resolution.
I'm missing a lot of the conversation because either the Wi-Fi internet connection is not very good, but I would not be in favor of bifurcating the turf project.
Thank you, Wendy. Catherine, did you have another point to make?
Excuse me. Yes, I mean, on this particular issue, I could see the impetus behind a slippery slope argument, which I think is what some are making, that if you were to split this out, why not in the future? But when we look at what's happening here in this instance, we're not looking at concerns or varying opinions coming on other pieces of the facilities project. We're looking at one particular very big ticket item that has a lot of support and a lot of opposition. And so allowing that to go up or down on its merits without dragging down the timeline or the investments on the rest of the facilities plan itself is in the interest of the community.
Any additional discussion?
So I'm struggling with the micromanagement of splitting up one thing when we had dozens of proposals. We cut some of them. We've talked about this in extraordinary detail. We've asked the experts for opinions. We've had debate. And the community vote is whether or not to spend money on the total bond project. To expand the purpose and intent of what that vote is meant to encompass is hard for me as well. And I did think a lot about the concept of bifurcation given the feedback that we've received on both sides. And I think I ultimately don't support the bifurcation of it.
If there is not additional discussion, I'd like to call for a vote on the motion.
I just thought I should probably add
sure.
my thoughts. At the last board meeting, I indicated that I support this turf field for the reasons that we all heard at the last board meeting. I think that it's important for our athletes and their families, and I want to make sure that that support is heard today. I do, however, also hear the community's concerns. We've heard their feedback along with the feedback from the people who support it. I also hear on our board that we have had two people who are opposed to the turf field. So I feel as though the split that we're seeing in the community is also mirrored in our board. For that reason, I want to make clear that I do support this turf field, and I hope it passes, but I would support bifurcating the vote simply to ensure that the community is able to vote on the things that it feels are most important. I know that many are concerned about wanting to vote against the turf field and for the rest of the improvements. And I don't see how bifurcating the vote would, excuse me, I feel as though putting the vote forward in a bifurcated way would support those people who want to vote one way on one thing and one way on the next. And it also allows the people who wanted to vote for both the turf field and the other improvements to do the same as well. So I would support bifurcating the vote.
Okay. The motion on the table is to amend the resolution to bifurcate the vote so that the artificial turf field is voted on separately from the remainder of the bond project. I think or the easiest way to do this is to do a roll call vote on this.
A vote in favor would be for, just to clarify, a vote in favor would be to bifurcate.
Correct.
A vote against would be to leave it as it is.
Correct. So a vote in favor would be to bifurcate. A vote against would be to leave the resolution as is. And we're just going to go around from this direction. Jonathan?
I'm in favor.
Willow?
Nay. Nay.
Christine?
Nay.
Nay. Holly? Nay. Wendy?
Nay.
Catherine?
I'm in favor.
Meredith?
I'm in favor.
It does not pass.
So now you have to
Now going back to the remaining item, it is recommended by the superintendent that the Board of Education approve the following finance action item number 6.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
nay.
Opposed? Nay, opposed, thank you.
Any abstentions? That passes. Moving on to item B, professional personnel action items. It is recommended by the superintendent that the Board of Education approve the following professional personnel action items 1 through 12.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? That carries. Item C. Before I state the recommendation, it was requested that we remove item 10 from this list. And in item 9, where it is listed 12-month, that is a typo. It should be 10 months. It is recommended by the superintendent that the Board of Education approve the following support staff action items 1 through 9 and 11 through 26.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion?
I have a question.
Yep.
Since we're down some drivers, do we have to approve the drivers in this? I mean, do we have to let them go?
I kind of think we do, if they want to go. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? That passes. D, other action items. It is recommended by the superintendent that the Board of Education approve the following action items 1 and 2.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion?
Just that I wanted to commend Jody for addressing the vaccination and the board for considering it.
Holly, can, in the resolution, I feel like we need to specify that we're talking about requiring a first dose by the date noted in the resolution.
First dose or second?
First.
I see, you're saying to clarify in the resolution that we're requiring a first dose of the mandatory COVID vaccination by September 9th?
Correct. If someone's not vaccinated, it would be physically impossible for them to achieve that, so.
Either that or to begin, a vaccination series by the 9th.
Well, if
So
we
we'll
clarify
amend
that, we
that.
also have to clarify the fact that they are expected to finish the vaccination series.
Yes. Sure, I just, reading it, it reads as if it is a condition of employment to be fully vaccinated by September 9th. And if you are someone who has not currently started your vaccination series, that's physically impossible to achieve, so.
So can we move to amend it?
Sure.
Do we want to move to amend that first sentence? Do you want to make the motion?
So moved.
Well, we need to state the motion first. So I didn't know if Willow had specific language she wanted to suggest to amend the resolution.
It's the first now therefore. Effective September 1st, 2021, the Board of Education of the Bethlehem Central School District adopts a policy requiring mandatory COVID-19 vaccinations, the first dose of which would be required by September 9th, 2021 as a condition of employment.
Okay, but what about the second dose? Because right now, the way it reads, it's saying you have to be fully vaccinated to work as of September 9th. So if we're saying the first dose by whatever date you're saying, we should have in there also the second dose, within a, say, 3-week period, because usually it's 2 weeks after you get the second dose.
Although keep in mind, there is the
Yeah.
one dose.
So we
Johnson
could,
and Johnson.
so we could say requiring all BCSD employees begin the COVID vaccination process by September 9th and complete it within CDC recommended timeframes or some
We could do something like that, so that way if you get the one dose or the two.
Or within the
Because Moderna's
administered
different
vaccine
than
required.
Pfizer too, so
The administered vaccine required timeframe.
something like
Right.
that, yeah.
I like that recommendation. I would just suggest that we edit it by taking out by September 9th, 2021 out of that sentence, and then making the second sentence what Catherine and Christine just recommended.
Right, so requiring all employees begin the vaccination process by September 9th. Excuse me, September 9th. Just making things up over here. By September 9th, as a condition of employment, blah, 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 all employees must finish what's the next sentence? All
The
employees.
administered vaccine recommended.
Can we get a Google Doc up here? Yes.
Couldn't you just say all
So-
employees must complete the,
And must begin vaccination process by September 9th and must complete the vaccination process per.
to be considered fully vaccinated per CDC, something like that?
Right, yes.
Okay. Brittany, can we pull up you've got it there. Is it possible can we edit that resolution? So if we scroll down to where it talks about the date, September 9th. Oh, not there. Oh, okay.
Here it says now therefore.
That's
Sure.
beautiful. Thank you. That would be tremendously helpful.
I also just looked on the Department of Health's website, and there are hundreds of available appointments tomorrow, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and Monday, so.
Yeah. They're easy to come by these days.
Oh, yeah, CVS.
much different than before.
So what I would do is if we, the sentence that starts now therefore, oh, or make it bigger. Yeah, so if we remove from that sentence just the words by September 9th, 2021. And then after where it says federal and state law, 2 lines down, we put in a new sentence there specifying what they need to do by September 9th. And somebody had the language. Catherine, you had the language.
So by September 9th, 2021, all employees must begin the vaccination process. Period. Furthermore, all employees must complete the vaccine series consistent with whose guidance? What were you saying, Christine? I'm sorry.
What is, with the, you changed the word, so say what you said at the beginning again.
All employees must complete the vaccination process consistent with, we were saying CDC guidance or DOH?
The manufacturer guidelines of whatever vaccine they've had administered, we started with the administered vaccine is what we said, administered vaccine.
Covered by CDC guidance.
Okay.
Whichever.
Right.
Well, does CDC have the, it's different for.
It does, they define fully vaccination, but what's fully vaccinated by the different vaccines.
2 weeks post the final
Right.
dose as required by the manufacturer. It's
There we go.
defined
Yeah,
in
the
CDC.
manufacturer, yeah.
Right.
All employees must begin as.
So I'd say, what about all employees must receive their first vaccination dose? I'm just only concerned about begin the
What is the
vaccination
process?
Right, yeah, right, exactly, they signed up. That's a good point. So must receive, the first and/or final dose?
Or we could start at all employees must receive the first vaccination by September 9th, 2021, and complete by the CDC manufacturing
I think that's fine,
requirement.
because if it's
Thank you.
only one shot, then that's
Then
still
that's
your
it.
first shot.
Exactly, we got boggled up by flipping the clause.
Yeah, so start it with all and put by September 9th after first vaccination.
Yep.
Here we go.
And, right, and then at that, after that beautiful, and must complete the vaccination
processed by CDC
process
manufacturing
consistent with-
requirements.
Right, consistent with CDC. Instead of by, just consistent with. Thank you, Brittany, you're fantastic.
Consistent
After
with.
process consistent with CDC guidelines.
And then going back to the process question, thanks for, again, Brittany, thank you. Could we just switch this to, should it say something along the lines of must become fully vaccinated? Because there is a definition for fully vaccinated, or are we good with finish the process? We have
I
many
think
attorneys
complete
here.
that covers it.
Okay, cool.
Anybody else not agree that complete the
Or
process?
you could say, instead of must complete the vaccination process, you could say must be fully vaccinated, consistent with CDC
Yes,
guidelines.
I like that better.
Is that
And must become fully vaccinated.
Consistent with CDC guidelines.
Yes, awesome, must become fully vaccinated with consistent. Beautiful. Yeah, that's better. More precise, anyway.
All right, does anybody else have any changes that they would want to make to the resolution?
Well, I think it's pretty good.
Okay, so first we should officially have a motion to amend the resolution so that it states as provided on...
In the Google Doc.
In the Google, I was going to say on the screen, but it states as provided on the screen.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? So the motion has been amended.
And again, just to say it again, the great leadership bringing this forward. This is fantastic.
Anybody else have comments that they'd like to make before we vote? I would just like to echo Willow's comments from earlier that I think that this policy just makes public health sense for our schools, our community, and our students.
And I'll add more than public health sense, but it really supports our goal of keeping children in school as often as possible. As Jody mentioned, last year, so much of the problems revolved around the fact that staff were quarantined, and if we have vaccinated staff, we will not have as many problems with large numbers of staff being quarantined.
And also health concerns for our staff as well, so it affects all members.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? That carries. Item 7, recognition of public comment on non-agenda items. If we have anyone with us who would like to speak to the board on a non-agenda item, now is the time to come up to the microphone. Item 8, future meetings and events. As mentioned, Thursday, September 9th is the first day of school for our K-12 students. Our next board meeting is on Wednesday, September 22nd, anticipating executive session at 6 and followed by the regular board meeting at 7. Monday, September 27th, there's an audit committee meeting at 5:30 p.m.
And that will also be the night of the community forum on the capital project as well.
Okay. And the community forum, just to restate, that's planned to be by Zoom, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Seeing no need to go back into executive session, could I have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Meeting adjourned.